Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any. Welcome to the SAIEE Women in Engineering chapter webinar on finding your path to a new engineering career. Before we start, a few webinar considerations. Attendees are reminded to ensure the volume is turned up on their device. Ensure you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure the streaming and audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the questions panel located within the GoToWebinar control panel. By default, the control panel is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The chat function is reserved for webinar organizers and panelists to communicate with attendees. Attendees will not be able to chat with each other, however, are encouraged to ask questions. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the SAIEE YouTube channel, SAIEE TV, under the WIE playlist. You will find the registration link to this SAIEE TV in the chat box. Please click on it and register. It's free. A certificate of attendance will be issued a few days after this webinar. I'd like to introduce you now to our host this evening, Ms. Mansi Glakudi, who is the Events and Marketing Coordinator for the SAIEE Women in Engineering chapter. She is professionally registered as a certificated electrical engineer with over 11 years of experience in distribution and transmission, specializing in specialized plant equipment failure investigations, renewable energy, transformers, and reactors. She's currently a chief engineer for transformers and reactors with a specific focus on transformer specifications, design reviews, factory capability assessment, factory acceptance testing, failure investigations, asset health appraisals, and technical support throughout the transformer's lifespan until end of life. She holds a BSc Honours from UCT and is currently busy with MSc Electrical Engineering. She's a member of the SEGRA A3 Study Committee, SEGRA Utility Advisory Board member, and expert member of the International Electrotechnical Commission, IECC, SEG 10 Ethics in Autonomous and Artificial Intelligence Applications. She's also Secretariat for the SAIEE Women in Engineering and Events and Communications Portfolio Lead for SAIEE's Central Gauteng Centre. Over to you, Mansi.
Thank you, Mix, and good evening, ladies and some gentlemen, if they are available. I hope you have your coffee or your bev ready as we are about to take off. Thank you for joining our conversation about finding your path to a new engineering career. We know and understand that changing careers can be so stressful, and the engineering industry can pose unique challenges, especially to women. We have created this platform to hear real stories from established professionals working in the industries. And today I'm joined by one of the remarkable and trailblazing women, the former WE chairperson, Makgola Makololo. Makgola Makololo is the Managing Director and Sales Executive for Alstom Rolling Stock South Africa. In this role, she's responsible for the locomotives business and also responsible for growing the South African market. Makgola is a seasoned leader, having been an acting Deputy Director General for Energy in the Department of Public Enterprises of the South African government with shareholder oversight on Eskom Energy, Safcol Forestry, and Alexco Mining until 2020. Makgola has served in various capacities in society and was co-opted onto the Green Building Council of South Africa board and served as chairperson of SAIEE Women in Engineering chapter. In 2017, Makgola was listed in the Mail and Guardian Top 200 Young South Africans and a Dutu Fellowship in 2019. Thank you for joining us, Makgola.
Good evening, Mansi, and it's always good to be here.
Yes, thank you, Makgola. And to kick off the conversation, Makgola, can you just please share with us your career path from university until now and share any challenges you might have experienced, how you overcame, and please also do include your highlights.
Sure. So I'll start just maybe a little bit back and how I got into engineering, which is what was really a chance decision. So I come from a family of teachers and nurses, I think as many of us would be. And when I started thinking about my career, I wanted to be a lawyer because I had one uncle who was a lawyer in the family. He's the only one who seemed to have a decent house and a decent car. And this is where you see the power of role modeling, because you could see the different careers and how they evolve into the reality of our lives. But then I was a high performer in terms of maths and science in high school, and therefore I got an ESCOM bursary to study engineering. I must say that when this decision for me to study engineering was made, I had never met an engineer in my life. And it was a decision that was made based on the fact that there was a demand for engineers in the country, and that the industry in general was investing in new skills. So I took up this career and I went to university. I must say university was quite a difficult experience for myself. I found it incredibly difficult. I think for most of us who came from high school as really high performers, getting into this new environment, I struggled through most of my university, I will say. And I think a lot of the concept really made sense retrospectively when I went into the work environment. So out of that, I then joined ESCOM as an EIT at Matla Power Plant. It was quite an interesting program. I think there was a lot of struggle in terms of trying to conceptualize what a good integrated program would be. But there was a lot of focus on giving, operational and technical experience and hands-on to be able to complement the theoretical experience that we bring in from school. It's a space that you have to navigate a lot because it's a school of the old and the new, trying to find a way to transfer skills and for us to learn. Very humbling in the sense that you have to find a way to learn without you being stuck into the academic aspect of what you have brought into the table. When I started working, I was very clear in my mind that I wanted to be a specialist. In my mind, I had experience of boardrooms where I felt that a management position was not for me, because my experience had been of people in boardrooms and endless talking, and I guess maybe I hadn't discovered my long-winded talking skills at the time. But I was very clear that I was not ready to take up a management position. I wanted to do a design kind of function. But I soon learned that at a power plant environment, that was not going to be possible. The engineering manager at the time tried to encourage me to consider a management experience, and I was not very keen. And at the time, then I decided to leave and joined Sasol for a period of time. I think my departure from ESCOM to Sasol really helped me reflect a little bit on what the ESCOM experience meant retrospectively and what ESCOM had offered me at the time. I must say I did not enjoy my stay. I stayed at Sasol for about a period of 18 months. I didn't find it a good fit for my career. I was a senior reliability engineer on one of the plants. And I soon spent quite a bit of time with mentors and people who had been on a similar journey to try and understand what would be the options available to me. And I returned to ESCOM in a management position at Hendrina as head of engineering, electrical engineering, which I did for a period of about a year. But in that period, I really had opportunity to be exposed to other aspects of engineering beyond electrical engineering and overall power system power plant management, which I greatly enjoyed. And I think I was given quite a lot of opportunity to manage and to lead in different areas. And in that way, I started developing my leadership and management career and having a better appreciation of what I thought was possible to grow as a career. I think fast forward 3-4 years, I started to realize that I wanted to have a much broader experience of the energy industry. I wanted to understand better policy. I wanted to understand better the country strategy around energy, and I started seeking opportunities in the government environment, and I landed at the Department of Public Enterprise. And I think within a year of arriving there, there was a lot of departures. And I was thrust into a really intense environment in terms of exposure to one policy formulation and the contest around policy formulation. I was exposed to, I think the highest decision making in the country, and out of that, you start to grow confidence about the possibility for an ordinary person to be able to have exposure and an opportunity to really function in those environments. It was not necessarily an easy journey getting into that. I think every single day you are challenged in terms of your knowledge of industry. You are challenged in terms of, I think the biggest challenge was really being the ability to align stakeholders and to be able to get parties to agree on a point. I think probably what the average person gets to see in the public domain is quite minimal compared to the contest that happens within policy formulation and policy making and government. So you really have to bring to the table skills that allow you to be able to negotiate, to be able to be a bit more pragmatic, also in terms of what you want to get out of any one situation. And I think out of that, you really start to develop a bit more pragmatic approach as a leader and as a person, and understanding better, I think for myself at least, how the world works and what you need to be able to bring to the table to be able to let's just say advance to advance in your career. I think fast forward to 8 years later, I left government in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I had been thinking about leaving government because I think there was a bit of frustration in terms of the lack of decision making around some of the challenges we were facing at the time. And I think they say a good musician knows when to leave the stage. So I also felt that it was a good time for me to go and explore other areas. At the time, I was ready to make my step into a more executive role within the energy industry because that's what I'd had in mind. But it was not to be. I explored a couple of opportunities, but it was not to be. And at a point, I came across an opportunity. A headhunter came to me with the role of a managing director in the rail industry. And I must say it was quite a mind block for me for a period of time, because I saw myself, yes, in general management, but really specialized in terms of the energy industry. And I couldn't see the possibility of me moving into another industry. And it took quite a lot of coaching conversations with different people for me to understand how I could pivot with my knowledge and leadership skills into another industry. But technically in a very different environment. And I think as an engineer, it's difficult for us to make that pivot more often, because we want to be, as much as we've chosen to take an engineering management role, we want to be quite knowledgeable in terms of the environment in which you lead, even if you're not meant to take the role as a technical lead. So it took me quite a while to understand that, but it was also a moment of reflection for me to understand that as a leader of people, your role is really to be more enabling to people, and to allow experts to really lead the technical discussions. So if you have a mature organization where you've got a good technical know-how, you can have a management that is more general, but obviously you have to immerse yourself in deep knowledge when you do join an industry, and you have to make the effort to be able to educate yourself a lot more. I've been in the role for two going on 3 years now, and I must say it's been quite fulfilling. I know more today than I knew 3 years ago. It's a humbling experience, but the expectations are high at this level, and you have to continuously improve. You have to continuously close the gaps in terms of what you know and what you don't know in order for you to be effective. So that's what maybe a long-winded response to your question, Mansi, about my journey up until to where I am today.
Wow, that's very, very, very interesting, Makhola. I take my hat off for you, from Eskom to Sasol, back to Eskom, to government, and now to private sector. And one question that I often ask myself is, how does one know that now is the right time for you to move? Because we find that many of us, we remain in the same position. Are we just missing the signs or the signals that now is the time to move? As you were navigating your career, how did you know that now is the right time for you to move?
Well, it's a complex. It's not a complex, but it's not a simple question or answer to what you're saying. And there's a famous saying that we must not underwhelm overwhelming problems, right? So I think, so first of all, I think we all have preconceived ideas about what our career paths should be. And we have more or less an idea of, the amount of time you need to invest in what areas in order for you to take onto the next steps. So firstly, if you are an engineering expert, I think a long tenure most likely is what's required in one's role to be a technical expert. I mean, I can tell you, I think ESCOM is pretty much the same, in the rail industry is the same. Our engineering experts have a 30+ tenure, our most senior engineering experts. So that's the kind of tenure you would expect. And I think as a technical expert, you wouldn't necessarily be making changes in career as often. If you are looking to pivot to like a management role, I think you have to firstly be very conscious of whether there is pull or push factors that are driving your decision. So if it's pull factors, is because there is something better that you are looking at and that you think would be more attractive. And with the best intentions, you could always make a wrong decision. I mean, I went to Sasol. I still don't think it was the best decision for me at the time, but at least it helped me to reflect on where I came from. In terms of push factors, sometimes we want to leave jobs because something is pushing us from where we are and we believe the environment is not right. Whether it's push or pull factor, the mission of that decision is about you and your growth. And that's what you must make it about. So sometimes we leave environments because we are frustrated, but so we are not choosing the next step, but we are being pushed into the next step. So it's important that you are conscious about that next step and that it is driven by your own agenda to move to the next stage. Because if you are not aware, even if it's a push factor, but it's not a conscious decision from yourself, I think you most likely will regret it later. So how do you know when it's the right time? I think it's dependent on your own aspirations, one, and whether you find yourself in a push or pull factor sort of environment, and whether the upside of that decision really makes sense and in line with your overall life decisions that you're making for yourself.
You've really said a mouthful and very thought-provoking thoughts. And how did you position yourself to change your careers?
How did I position myself? Because I think at the point where I made the decisions to move to the different places I've moved to, I would always try and seek insights for people who are already in those environments. I would always try and understand, the work environment. And like I said, you don't always get it right. You don't always get the right experience because you're always getting an insight from somebody who's having their own experience. Which may not necessarily be reality, based in objective reality, but just their own experience. And you can move into the exact same environment and not be a match for that environment. But I think asking questions, I think we are way past an era where you walk into a company and you are cold to the entire environment. We've got enough resources at our disposal to find 2, 3, 4 people in any organization before you make a decision to join. So you go to LinkedIn, you find common friends, you find common professionals on your network to be able to get those insights about an organization before you move. And I think we have to be so deliberate about that conversation. And that's why I caution about the danger of push factors, because sometimes you are so pressed by the push factors in your environment that you overlook some of the factors in your new environment that you only get to realize once you have signed on and you find that the move you have made doesn't really serve the next steps that you want to take in your career. So do your research, speak to people, make it make sense to you, and make it own up to the decision that you take ultimately. Otherwise, it may not necessarily be the best choice for yourself.
Yeah, that's very true. One thing that I'm taking away is always making research about where you're going.
Yep.
And I just want to find out from you that as you're changing careers, how did you overcome the fear? Because many people you come across would often say that I've got this fear that if, for instance, if I leave the government institution and go to private sector, tomorrow I might be jobless. There's so many things that can create fear in someone. How did you overcome that as you were changing careers?
I think you take your calculated risk. You're absolutely correct. So when I left government and I went to the private sector, there was an acquisition in the pipeline, and I was pretty sure that I had done enough research and that this transaction would happen in a year's time. And 4 months on the job, this transaction happened, and I thought, here comes retrenchment. And luckily for me, that was not the case. But like I said, what is your overall plan? Because you need to be able to transcend some of the negative things, negative factors that you may encounter in your new environment, but it's ultimately must be linked to your overall career path that you want to follow, and your belief that that next step is going to give you the exposure, the experience, and the skills that you need for you to be able to be to progress on your career path. And like I say, it is absolutely possible that you will make the wrong choice. You join an organization and you are an absolute misfit, and you can't maybe deal with the culture, you find it difficult to fit with the work ethic in that environment. And I think it's okay to make those mistakes, and that if you are not that fit, it's okay to take a step back and change and reroute the path that you have taken. But ultimately, getting out of your comfort zone and taking a next step to go join a different organization, it's a risk that you take. But who knows? What if it all works out and the highs are just as good as what you thought they may be. So it's a calculated risk at the end. But let it be your choice. You must take that step because it is your decision.
Oh, very true. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's also okay to take a step back and recalculate. And I just want to find out from you, what types of skills did you have to possess or build while you're navigating your career journey?
Kind of skills. I mean, I think there's a lot of skills that one needs to develop and grow, and that are expected at different levels in your career and in the different levels that you function in an organization. So the first one obviously is leadership and management, and there's two aspects to this. And I've been preaching this for some time. The first part about leadership is really self-leadership. To be able to grow your own self-leadership journey and discipline before you can even talk about the discipline of leading others. And this is going through a process of understanding yourself, understanding what drives you, understanding what drives your view of the world, understanding what drives your view of others, being conscious of your own biases as a person that would show up in different environments as you interact with others. And I think, if you spend enough time, and there's enough resources really online about managing yourself, and this is really, really a critical part. I find that often we talk a lot about leadership, and it's always about leading others. I think leading yourself is absolutely, absolutely critical. And there's a lot of resources that are available on this topic. There's a lot of psychological journals that have been written, that have been mental behavioral models that have been developed to be able to help you understand this about yourself. And I think once you've traversed that part about understanding yourself, leading others becomes far more easier, because you develop a level of confidence because you understand what drives you, you understand what drives others, you then understand, you then become a bit more confident about yourself, and you are a lot more mature emotionally, because you understand what is it that drives you, and what is it that drives a human being overall. I mean, there's a lot of resources. I'm sure you've come across things like Johari's window, which helps you understand it talks a lot about the things that you know about yourself that other people know, the things that other people know about you that you don't know about yourself, the things that you know about yourself that other people don't know about yourself, and then the black box where there are things about you that you don't know that other people don't know. What are the safe spaces for you to be able to get feedback about yourself, about your behavior, about your responses to situations? And I think this is quite important. Understanding your circle of influence, understanding the things that you can control and things that you can't control. And this really makes you a lot more mature as a leader, and make you a lot more secure in yourself because you understand yourself better. Then you can talk, about developing your leadership, about leading others. And I think there's really a lot of material that I think all of us have come across in terms of leading others. But if there's one parting shot that you can take from tonight's conversation is about leading yourself, that's very important. Of course, you need to be able to have a network that you can access for different things. I always say I value every interaction that I've had with people over my entire career paths, and it doesn't mean every interaction is an interaction that results with you being a business partner, a colleague, or a friend, whatever. But it's just knowing that if I needed a resource in this kind of function, environment, place, there is a network that I can access. And that just comes from having a good skill in terms of networking, presenting yourself to people, and making that connection that you can access at a later time. You need to have visibility if you want to be in certain spaces, depending on where you want to function. You need to be visible. You need to promote yourself. You need to be able to have a network that you can access that will make you a lot more visible. So I mean, I think there is quite a lot of skills that we can talk about, but it's most important to talk about how we develop those skills, how to develop trust between yourself and your teams, yourself and others, and understanding how your authentic self shows up in different spaces at different times. But self-leadership is really, really an important topic for all of us, whether you want to be an expert or whether you want to be in engineering management or general management. It's important that you really, really master and understand yourself.
Oh, that is very thought-provoking. Self-leadership and discipline, creating safe spaces for one to receive feedback and promoting yourself. And out of interest, looking back at your journey, are there things that you might have done differently?
What would I have done differently looking back? I think I'm fairly content with the path I've traveled. There's things that I wanted that I didn't get. I've had a lot of closed doors where it didn't make sense, but I tend to accept the philosophy that we must play the cards that we are dealt, and it's important to recognize when those opportunities and moments are open to you and that you take advantage of them. Looking back, I wish I had done more in terms of immersing myself more in other moments and taking the time to celebrate smaller successes, because I think it's a skill and a feat that we all need to learn, that in pursuit of bigger and better things, it's okay to also stop and enjoy the moment and feel good about it for that period of time. So I wish I had immersed myself a lot more in moments of victory, even in moments of disappointments, to take the lessons from that. But in general, I believe in playing the cards that you've been dealt, good and bad. I believe in being grateful for closed doors that were never open to you, that I really thought there's doors that I thought were a really good, important part of my journey that were never accessible to me for some reason, and I'm okay with that.
Wow, that's good. Enjoying and savoring the moment. And out of interest, how do you deal with rejection? How did you deal with those closed doors? Dealing with those closed doors?
I think it's only human to feel disappointed, and I think, you know, it's simplistic to say you're grateful for closed doors. It's only retrospectively when you look back, where because you're in a better place, you like, okay, I'm glad that didn't happen because I wouldn't be here today. But it's really learning to accept that we don't get everything in life. We work hard to get what we can, and that when we have, or when we're given a moment to be something or to do something, that's the opportunity that we take, and we maximize that, and that when the time is right, the next opportunity will come up, and that we make the best of that moment.
Very interesting, when the time is right. And I just want us to tackle another elephant in the room. They call it the imposter syndrome. How has it affected your career? Have you ever experienced it? If you have, how have you dealt with it? And how would you advise someone who's currently dealing with it?
Yeah, it's a real thing, eh? It happens, and I think more often than not, it's not based in reality. So that moment when you are stuck in your mind and you are feeling like, I shouldn't be here, this CV that's been read is not good enough, it's not me, I don't deserve to be in this room. It's mostly based on it's not based in reality, because you probably look at people in the room and you think they know more than you. So it does happen. It does visit you at different moments, and despite the experiences or opportunities that you've had, you always find yourself. But it's important that we really find practical ways to try and get over it, because the imposter syndrome is based in perfection. It's based on the idea that you have to be exceptionally good, and it's a burden that we carry as women, where we feel like we have to know a concept 100% before we can step into a room or a boardroom to be able to engage in a conversation. It's based in perfection, and it's really a flawed philosophy on how we reflect on ourselves. So if we know that we are in a role because we are good enough and we have qualified to be in that environment, that should be good enough for us to engage. And that we need to learn to be a lot more kind to ourselves than we have been, and that the expectations that we would be 100% knowledgeable on every subject is really flawed. I don't think there is, even if I talk to my global chairman, he has a good idea about a lot of things, but he certainly doesn't know every single detail, because if he did, he wouldn't have the rest of the group that's contributing to that. So we need to understand our role, understand and possess the facts about that particular role and situation. We need to be able to pat ourselves on the back when we have done well. We need to be able to accept when we don't know something. You know, it's imposter syndrome, for me, possesses me to a point where I sit in meetings and I hear a concept I've never heard of. I'll write it down, and the minute I get an opportunity, I'll go and research, you know, a specific concept that I didn't know about. But I also realize that, you know, I'm not meant to be a finance guru. That's why I've got a finance director that's able to be there and to understand the number, understand the level at which I need to function, and understand the numbers in order for it, for the business to be able to function effectively. So celebrate yourself, celebrate what you're contributing to the team. You are there for a reason. Accept when you've made mistakes, when you have failed, and when you don't know something, and ask questions. It's only empowering that you ask questions. And I think the important thing about asking questions is that you are it allows others to be able to see the human part of you, especially as a senior leader in an organization, to say, I don't understand that. There's no shame in being able to raise your hand. Of course, it has to be things that you truly are expected not to know. But if it's things that you are supposed to know, of course you're supposed to know that. But I think imposter syndrome is based in perfection, and it's really a flawed philosophy. We need to allow ourselves to shine in what we know, and to give ourselves enough grace that we have earned being in these rooms, and that it's enough. You know, I grew up with this idea where I've always found myself thrust into rooms that I believed were too big for me because I'm too young and I'm too this. And I look at other people who are far younger than me, in much more senior roles, and they walk into the rooms and most of the time, it's male colleagues, and they flawlessly strut into the room and they talk with command on subject that I know they've got know very little about. So we need to give ourselves grace, empower ourselves with knowledge, know the facts, but you need to be able to celebrate the fact that you do know something, and that's why you are there. So stop self-doubting yourself, raise your hand, speak, and express an opinion. It's never silly. Express an opinion.
That's very interesting and very, very profound. In your view, do you believe that social media can make imposter syndrome worse?
Social media. Does it make it worse? So I believe social media is about expressing ourselves on social media. A big part of that is about authenticity and intent. So for me, there's always two things: the authenticity and intent. So authenticity is the things that I am saying on social media. Are they the things I would say in private, right? So if I am on social media and expressing a thought about something that I would never say in private, then there's a distance between my real self and what I'm projecting on social media. So there is a level of fake that is being projected. The second one is, what is the intent of putting stuff on social media? But I think it takes a lot of courage for one to be a thought leader and to be able to put your views on social media and to be able to defend that. So if your intent is really being on social media, and we're talking social media in respect to your professional image, is if your intent is to educate and to engage and to learn, surely you should have the courage to be able to do so. But sometimes we second guess ourselves so much that you would feel like whatever it is that I have to add on this topic, I'm going to get attacked. I mean, I don't think social media is the most, it's probably the most unregulated space for one to go and express a thought. But in order for public opinion and public narrative to be based in fact and reality, it requires that those who know actually engage in that. I personally don't engage a lot in social media dialogue on various topics. Because I want to be able to engage in a topic that I know will lead to a decision, or will at least be shared in an environment where it's going to lead to something. Half the time, I just find that it expenses time and it doesn't really lead to anything tangible. So I tend not to engage.
That's interesting. And ladies and gentlemen, please, if you do have any questions, please put it on our chat. We will be taking the questions in a few minutes' time. And just to proceed, earlier you mentioned that you need to have a solid network or a supportive community. And I must say that the time when you were a chairperson for We, I've seen you leverage those network and communities. They really came handy. How do you build such a solid network of those supportive communities?
I think I'm intentional about how I meet people. Excuse me. So if I were to go to an event tonight to network, I'm very intentional. I was fortunate enough to actually had a mentorship discussion or teaching on networking a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2013, about the intent to network. So I was on not a scholarship, whatever, but I was in the US for a few weeks, and part of being there on the exposure was there was an intense networking events that we attended, and we all had mentors, and the mentors would be very strict in terms of when you go and introduce yourself to Mansie, go and introduce yourself, tell them what do they do, what do they do. So you don't just meet a person and then somehow the conversation starts fizzling into this social dialogue about life in general. Be intentional. You are sitting next to somebody, you are on your phone, it's a networking event. I mean, if you are going to go and spend 1 hour of your evening in a networking event, you are deliberate about it. You introduce yourself and you try to understand who is in the room. And this is very important, because sometimes you walk into a room and you go home, you find out 2 days later you actually sat next to Magic Johnson and you didn't even know about it. It's very important that you walk up to people. If you walk into an event, a networking event, and introduce yourself. I think in general, even if it's meetings and it's work meetings, you always try and understand who is who are the people who are in spaces that you would like to be able to engage in and to be able to access. And you make a deliberate effort to when the opportunity presents itself, to be able to network with them. And that comes from being able to really value each interaction. I value each interaction I have with every person that I meet. And it doesn't have to be the most senior person in the room, but it's who is here in the room. I found that for myself, it makes it easy for me to engage. If I walk into let's just say it's a new meeting about a new topic, I walk into a room, I need to know who's in the room before I can express myself and understand at what level I'm going to interact. So that also helps you to be able to network and form relationships. And if you do happen to go to a networking function, you meet somebody that you think you want to build a relationship, get home and send the text. The one thing I learned in this US exposure that I was telling you about was, before you go to an event, look at who's coming and check their LinkedIn. And funny enough, we had this, I'll call it the South African thing, where people will be on some, oh, Manti looked at my profile. Why are they looking at my profile? It's LinkedIn for a reason. You put up your profile up for a reason, and people will look you up before they come and meet with you. Otherwise, why are you making all these connections? And why do you have this profile if you're not going to use it? So before you go and meet people, actually know who they are and understand what they are about, their background. I think it doesn't take much, and it just makes, when you meet somebody and you already know something about them, it just makes it that much easier for you to connect with a person. So I think it's being deliberate. Be deliberate about building the network.
So very true, being intentional about building the networks. And out of interest, what are your hopes for the future of engineering in South Africa?
I think for South Africa, I mean, South Africa's got a lot of challenges from an engineering perspective, but I've always held the view that we are not short of engineering solutions. So maybe what my hope is that I can see a lot more engineers taking up space in the non-engineering spaces. So when I joined government, it didn't make sense to a lot of people. And people would ask, why would you, I mean, it's not necessarily the most high paying job you're ever gonna come across. But those are the sort of spaces where decisions are being made. So we need, beyond the sectors and the spaces that we currently know, but for us to be able to engage a lot more in the social spaces, social political spaces, because that's where solutions and policy is being derived, and that a lot more of us need to be able to share our information and share knowledge. And one can ask, you've been there and you left. Yes, it's not easy. It's not easy, but if we are to play a meaningful role as engineers, we need to be able to get into those spaces and influence and inform and teach various stakeholders to be able to do that, and to really find our voice, our collective voice as engineers in the country, because I think more often than not, it's not very comprehensive, it's not collected, it's not consolidated to be able to say to industry, to say to public works, this is what is available. But technically, I think solutions are there and they are known, but can we engage a lot more meaningfully?
That's very true. And what opportunities are available for women within the engineering sector? I think a lot of us ask ourselves, what opportunities are available?
I think it's more, I think the question is more, which opportunities are not accessible to engineers. I think with an engineering background, you really can access a lot of opportunities. I actually would like to see a lot more engineers go into entrepreneurship and go into business, because if you look at, and maybe this is part of the infrastructure problems we have in the country, if you look at the caliber of people that are actually going into business and trying to execute projects in South Africa, it's not engineering professionals. So maybe we would like to see a lot more innovation, a lot more people taking up a risk and starting a business. And of course, there has to be the ecosystem that drives that actually supports starting up a business and for you to be able to be sustainable and make a living out of it. But I think the opportunities are vast. I think we need to have a growing economy that would allow for a lot more sectors to grow and thrive and to therefore create more opportunities. But I think there is, with an engineering background, you can take up roles in many sectors, in many different roles. You can think about, pivoting to a more commercial environment, and that you would need to upskill yourself a bit more in terms of understanding project finance and that sort of skills. But I think there's really a lot of space for engineers to find space and to grow into.
That's very true. There's a lot of opportunities. And ladies and gentlemen, if you still have a question, please send it through. And if not, I'm going to ask Mahula our last question. How do you build, what advice can you give your younger 25th or 30th self?
What would I tell my younger self? So I just turned 40 a few months ago. So I've had a little bit of time to reflect about what life has been the last 40 years and how I could have lived it differently. So I think a couple of thoughts. So for me, it's life gets busy. Life gets very busy. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to cover. So the first thing is that you have to be very deliberate in how you want to live. You have to be very deliberate on how you want to spend your time. I read this I can't remember. It was a list of senior persons or old persons that were asked what they wish they could tell the younger self, and one of the things was that nobody wished they'd had more meetings. So it's about putting meaning into your life and your time and making sure that you're filling your time with things that are important to you. So have an end in mind. Don't get to the end of your life or to different milestones in your life and wish you had done things differently. So have an end in mind in terms of how you're expensing your time and how you're expensing your energy, and do it your own way. I consider myself a nonconformist. I really I've got a niece. She's 3. I see myself in her. I worry about her. I'm a nonconformist. I'm prepared to live life, and like I said, playing the cards that I've been dealt, and not necessarily following any one specific path that may feel good to somebody but not feel good to me. So you must be in a position to account and be happy with the choices that you make for yourself and for your life. So time will tick, time will move, whether you plan for it or not. So be deliberate in how you spend your time, and that comes from being able to understand what are the things that are important to you. You do those things first. Create your own agenda, determine your agenda, live your agenda, and defend your agenda. That's defend how you want to spend your time, because many things will pop up in your space, and you have to decide on how you want to, or on how you want to prioritize that. So determine your own priorities, otherwise life will do that for you. So that's what I would tell my younger self. I've had fun in the last 40 years. I wish I doubled on that. It's good to build a great career. It's good to build a balanced life, but just be sure that how you're spending your time in your life, your one given life, is really how you want to live, and that you, at the end of all of this, you'll be happy with it.
Oh, and congratulations on joining us on the 4th floor. I'm joking. Congratulations on reaching the fourth floor.
The grays are starting to show, so you will see more weaves.
Yeah, one thing I took away is that be deliberate about how you want to spend your time, having an end in your life. So there's quite a number of questions. I'm just going to try and go through them before we close. Hi, Mahola. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You are an inspiration to many of us, and we are very proud of you. My question to you is as follows. South Africa is currently facing challenges with regards to the energy crisis, declining economy, etc. How do you keep yourself and others positive or motivated in the midst of it all?
How do I keep myself motivated in the midst of all of this? And I think it's a big function of leadership to keep people feeling positive and optimistic in the midst of challenges. I think we have to be. I have great belief in my country. I really believe South Africa can be a much more greater place than it already is. I believe that we will resolve the challenges that we are faced with. I believe that all of us need to focus on the things that we are supposed to contribute in order to make this country a success. I also do believe that we need to spend the time having the difficult conversations in the spaces where we are in about what needs to happen and the different routes or pathways to a better country. So not to be naive about the state of things and the things that keep one awake as a business leader and worrying about your own, firstly as a business leader and for your own personal, safety and personal thriving. So I do have a lot of conversations behind closed doors with different people about, these are the things that concern us as business leaders. These are the things that concern us as individuals, as families. However, we have to stay optimistic. I'm still of one passport, and I don't dream about having another one. So it's really staying positive and trying to motivate others to do the same.
Thank you for that, Mahola. Another question, even in Mahola, you spoke earlier about being visible, being able to promote yourself. Would you share with us some examples of how one can better position themselves in their field?
Sure. I mean, I think I always advocate for thought leadership. And I know corporate environments are not always in support of this externally. So, for example, having Manti on radio talking about energy, but creating those platforms internally for you to be able to express your thoughts could be a great place for you to find a space to create visibility for yourself. I also believe that, and it leads back to the earlier question about people who have been in environments for too long. So internally to any organization, I've always created enough space for myself to know things beyond my immediate areas of responsibility. So for example, if you are a system engineer at a power plant, there is nothing that stops you from growing your knowledge in other functions, your finance, commercial, and so forth, and actually extending a hand and being known as that person who's always willing to go the extra mile. So have a bigger agenda in terms of understanding your knowledge beyond doing the bare minimum and leaving. I find that is very effective if you become a go-to person, and that if you on your own accord take the challenge to actually know a little bit more than if you are, an electrical engineer, that's all you're prepared to know, and you leave side. So expand yourself, make yourself accessible to others beyond, and where you can, lend a hand in other areas. But you have to create your visibility by, I think, going beyond the extra mile helps quite a lot. And thought leadership, ways allowed in your environment, is a very good way for you to actually express and for people to understand the depth of knowledge you have.
Yes, that's very true. Be an extra miler. Another question for you, Mahola. I would like to ask, how do you encourage young girls or kids in rural areas, especially to stay in engineering?
The young ones are difficult, eh? I find that the younger generation has quite a wide resource of information, and they are quite capable of researching and understanding a lot more. I think our responsibility is really to help them understand themselves. We have a responsibility to help them understand the world and understand how the world works better, so that they understand, or that at least they make informed choices about the career paths that they want to show. I think this generation has a much better base in terms of role models and what they are able to see as, say, success stories from a whole host of women engineers, women leaders that are available in the country, and that I think makes it a lot more easier than for us who didn't really have those role models to look up to. So of course you have conversations, of course we have career expos, but I think in every small space we need to find the time to be able to firstly help these kids understand themselves, understand what drives them, and try and sway them into an engineering career for them, so that they understand what an engineering career is, and what opportunities it can expand for one, and how whether that would be a match in terms of their ambitions for themselves.
Thank you, Mahola. I think the last question before you do the parting shots is, often during events like this, we hear these two words, imposter syndrome, and you need to grow a thick skin. Thanks for your thoughts on the first one. I would like to hear your thoughts on the latter, growing a thick skin. Thank you.
Growing a thick skin. So growing a thick skin. Do I have a thick skin? So like I said earlier on, for me, being self mastery is a very important feat, because part of what you will learn about yourself will help you grow a very high EQ as a person, and it will help you grow a lot more empathetic towards people. So things that ordinarily, as a younger version of myself, I would be very upset about, I'll be very negative about in the work environment, I tend not to be moved, because more often than not, when I am in an environment where I have, let's just we'll call it toxic manager. I don't like the word toxic, but for lack of a better word, I tend to empathize with people that act that in the workplace, rather than for me to get upset. I understand very quickly that when a person behaves in that way, it has very little to do with me and a lot more to do with what's happening inside of themselves. So once you understand what drives a human being, what drives behaviors, what drives people's attitude, I think you have a much better appreciation that it has less to do with you and a lot more to do with what's going on inside of themselves. And I remember, in my previous role, I used to say to the team that when you have a bigger mission as a person, you tend to be a lot less sucked into your immediate realities, because your fortunes are not necessarily tied to these immediate things that are happening in front of you. I'm not sure if I'm expressing this well, but you have to always appeal to your bigger mission and a bigger purpose as a person, because I'm not going to let a person that I've met over the last 3-4 years change my perspective about myself and my perspective about my outlook on life. I don't allow that because I understand myself well, and I understand what drives me, and I understand what is it that I'm trying to achieve in this specific period and what I want to take away from this experience. So once you've mastered how you think about yourself, once you've mastered understanding what drives people, I think your EQ really matures a lot. And yes, you will still find moments that do put you down, but in the main, you bounce back to those things that help you understand yourself and being focused solely on your own mission.
Yes, thank you, Mahola. I see it's 18:59. Thank you so much, Mahola. It's always nice to have you. And one thing that I also learned from you, I think when you served as a chairperson, is that you need to choose your battles right. So I've learned so much from you, and I believe that the attendees as well today have learned so much. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please just allow Minx to give us a poll There's just one poll that we have to do, and I believe then we can part ways after that. Thank you very much. I believe as you're answering that, Mahola, can I just ask you to do parting shots? Once you're done, then we can end the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Mansi, and thank you for SAIEE for inviting me once again. I think from my side, always happy to share my experiences. This is my journey. It's not a Bible, but this has been how I have traversed this journey. It's been about discovery. It's been about self-discovery, and I think there is a lot more learnings for myself going forward. And I look forward to understanding myself more and understanding the world in a much better place. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mahola. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have 2 hands out. Please download them and read them at your own free time. Thank you very much. We look forward to hosting you in our next events in August. Thank you very much and sleep well. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.